And welcome to the Firearms Nation podcast, video channel, live show. I am back. It's been a while since I've done a live show, and I'm really happy to be doing this. This is what people do these days. They do live shows. I like recording the podcast live because it adds an extra flair to it, and you get your questions answered. Sometimes people will mail questions, but it's great when people actually tune into the show. And of course, hopefully, it's working. I've had some issues today, but anyways, tonight I am bringing back probably the most repeated guest on this show. And that is Steve Anderson, who, as we'll be talking today, I've known Steve for a long time now. He was actually my inspiration to do a show, and it's great to see how he's grown and how his journey's been, how my journey's been, how my journey's stalled. We'll talk about that. But if you're new to the show, please subscribe to the audio if you're listening to this on the podcast. If you are watching the video show on Firearms Nation, subscribe to the channel, because that way you can see not just these types of videos, but also other videos, crazy videos that I do, reviews and that sort of thing. But I just love having you here, and however many people show up, sometimes I've had 300 some people on, some people I have people on, but it's not a reflection on the guest. So thank you all for being here. And as we start this Thanksgiving show, let me bring on Steve. Steve, let me unmute you. Welcome back on the Firearms Nation podcast.
Hello, Arik. It's wonderful to be here as always. We've known each other a very, very long time, and I have been scolded by you for the audio on my podcast that entire time. So we've gone through great lengths to make today's audio video experience as professional as your show deserves. Great to be here.
Well, thank you very much. And I will say that your show has evolved, and it's good. And there's just so much to unpack with you. And I think I'm very 2024 by using that word unpack. I don't think I normally use that in my lexicon, but anyways, Steve, last time I had you on the show was almost 2 years to the day. I looked it up. It was November 16th of 2022. And that was my 200th episode. I think this will be my 250th episode. The timing is a little different. I know there probably, if people do the math, there should be a couple more shows. But as someone who's done podcasts for a long time, sometimes you're in a rhythm and you're getting them out daily. Sometimes it's months go by before you get another one out. And just, for people to know who are not in like the podcast world, if you make it past 7 shows, they consider you like a veteran. Seriously, most
Really?
shows die. Yeah, most shows die after 7 episodes. They call it pod fading.
I had no idea. I've been at it probably 10 years now.
Oh, more than that. Because I
Yeah.
remember that's how I like I said, I found your show. It's funny. You met my kid, and I was telling him about how I first met you. And I remember to this day, it was SHOT Show. I want to say like 2010, 2011. And I was flying back, and I was just trying to pick up any type of, you get all hyped up at SHOT Show, and you're just trying to find something to listen to about guns. And I just started competing. And sure enough, there was this thing called That Shooting Show. And I was like, oh, cool. And I think we talked about this before. You were definitely a different type of podcaster back then. You were doing all sorts of weird things. You had your mom on your show, and it was goofy. But you did talk some interesting concepts. And I went out and got your book, the first book, Principles of Performance. And Refinement and Repetition.
There we go. You got Steve Anderson's first dry fire book. That's the one you got. Nobody knows the names. It's fine.
It's fine. They call it Steve Anderson's first book.
There we go.
Yeah. So I got that book, and I sought you out because You were doing phone calls back then. That's how things were done back then. You did it by phone. This video stuff was still back in 2011, whatever. It was still kind of new. So that's how we hooked up, and it's been a good relationship. You know, you've definitely helped me a lot, and I'm sure you've helped so many other people. So yeah, that's my backstory with you.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of people don't realize. In fact, I was talking to a colleague the other day, and she was scolding me for how lousy the podcast was in the beginning. You know, I was literally holding my cell phone up to the microphone to play the Van Halen songs,
Yes.
and and she said to me, I it was unlistenable. But we got that cleaned up a little bit. You know, I feel sorry for people if that was their first exposure to me. I kind of feel sorry for them because you really had to be a trooper to get through all that stuff. But at the time, it was something I was just doing for fun. It wasn't. I wasn't even teaching classes then. I thought maybe I'd sell a couple more books if if I did a podcast. But as a young man growing up listening to talk radio, it was something that I always kind of wanted to do, and I didn't even know what a podcast was when somebody encouraged me to do one. And I enjoy it. And as you mentioned, the running joke on my show is, okay, here's the exact same show for the 100th time, and and inevitably somebody will email me and say, we love that show. Do it 101 times because we're still not getting it. And so here I am. You know, I also joke frequently that a well-written owner's manual for a red dot site puts me out of business. So please don't write one. That's the other.
Yeah, you know, it takes a lot. You know, we're part of the media now that is, I guess, that flustered the Kamala Harris campaign because they didn't get on the right podcasts. And how the media is saying, you know, podcasts are this, they're not real journalists. But you know what? Now so many people are into podcasts, and it's great to be there. I don't know about you, but for me, I love doing these things. I love being able to talk to a variety of different people. First and foremost, I learn every time I do this. I learn something, but I'm sure this has happened to you many times. But I was just in a class a couple weeks ago, and some guy came up to me in the class, and he's like, you know, like he knew my name and everything, and he's like, you know, you've done so much for me. I've listened to your shows all the time. I go back and I listen to this show, and I'm touched by it because to me, this is something that I just do kind of for fun. But the fact that people go back and listen to things over and over again and get something from it, I mean, that's just definitely rewarding. It's like
Yeah, I
teaching.
mean, you could call that the butterfly principle or the ripple effect or whatever you want to call it. But yes, it does happen to me all the time, and I'm always very, very grateful. And I don't know if I know humbled is the word you're supposed to use, but that's not really how I feel. Honored, I think, is a better word. I'm
Hmm.
just so honored to be able to save people time and take something that everybody they really want it to be complex, and I want it to be simple. And you know, when we can take all the different ideas about shooting and distill them down into something very simple, that's really powerful.
So people don't realize in the instruction world how it goes up in these different weird cycles. And I'll explain more what I'm talking about. So I'll start on the tactical side. You know, there were certain tactical instructors that a lot of people, law enforcement and military guys sought out, contractors sought out back when I first got into this business. And they were the bomb. Everybody wanted to train with these guys or the single guy. And then they disappear. Right? Now they're spoke of as legends, or some people don't like them at all, but they were there and they're gone. And I want to say that was less than a 10-year period. Um, and you know, obviously things happen. Either they get sick or they get involved in some sort of controversy. But it's tough in the instructor world to continue on and on and on. And you're definitely, you have your niche. And like in my view, you had your dry fire niche. No one was talking dry fire. That was you. And then thankfully you took on you were always talking mental management, but you really now are, ominous dominus, serious mental management. You are part of that program. And you've been around for a long time now. I mean, like I said, I knew of you back in 2010, 2011, and now we're in almost 2025. And you were teaching a little bit before that. So that's a long time. That's a long journey. How does that feel?
Feels great. On the subject of dry fire, anybody that's writing a book or talking about dry fire, that was born from refinement repetition. I mean, that's where that came from. And the reason I know that is because if somebody else had had a book about it, I would have bought it and I wouldn't have written the one that I wrote. And I never set out to do anything other than I was desperate to become a grandmaster in USPSA. And once I did that, I was the first grandmaster in the state of Ohio. I beat Bob Vogel to grandmaster. And people kept asking me, how did you do it? And I had these 12 drills, and I'd write them down and here you go. And then some people listening to this program probably have a copy of that book that doesn't even have a proper cover because I was making them at Kinko's. And Jay Beal, if you're listening, you'll have to Google Kinko's because that was a thing. I was joked that Jay Beal has to Google things because he's so young. But yeah, it just feels amazing. The greatest, there's been so many great compliments. I've had other people tell me that my book inspired them to write their book. You're telling me that my podcast inspired you to do a podcast. I think that's awesome. I just love all that stuff. And I'm just proud to still be relevant and out there, again, saving people years of struggle. That's my passion.
So I'm obviously listening to you talk, but I'm looking at some of the stuff that you have in the background. It almost looks like you're in a gun store, but you're not in a gun store.
So I am in my roommate's vault. Okay. I'm living in Kentucky now. I've got a roommate, and this is literally a cistern that was part of his house structure that he has literally turned into a gun vault.
That's
And
fascinating.
it's incredibly well protected. It's incredibly well defended. So, and you're only looking at so though the walls behind me are actually the ones that have the least amount of guns on them. Every wall in this room, I'm not even going to say the number out loud. But have you ever seen a custom shop SIG 210? Most people will never see one of those. And here's
Now,
one you'll never see. You will
wait.
never see a Van Halen striped High Point 45. You'll never see one of those ever again. But yeah, that's where I am.
So I have a buddy who does a lot of videos with me on classic firearms, and I'm gonna make sure he watches this video so he can identify all the guns in the background because that's kind of what he does. Because I'm sure he's gonna be listening, and I'm gonna force him to do that. His name is Bob. Um, but getting back to your journey from where you started and to where you are now. So one thing I'm always curious about for someone who's been in this business of teaching for so long, what are you seeing different from people who are coming to your classes?
Are we talking about trends in general or different behaviors?
Behaviors.
Okay. So the training industry, everybody in it always needs something to sell. Okay. And I'm no different, right? What I sell is match mode, dry fire, and of course mental management. That's my thing. Okay. So what I see in classes are people that are buying the other things that other people are selling, and typically they're missing a mental component on how to use all this stuff that they're learning. So, and frequently I get the people, and I don't know if other instructors get this or not, but I frequently get people who tell me, if you can't help me, I'm going to quit the sport. I get a lot of those. And we're also seeing unprecedented obsession over how much force to exert in every single one of my fingers to get the proper grip. Like I need 18% more of this pinky. I need to loosen this one by 10%. I get a lot of that. We're seeing a ton of occluded dots, whether they're necessary, helpful, or not. We're seeing a lot of staccatos. I can tell you that. But yeah, it's so like every class is different, but every class is the same. And I'm sure you've experienced that in the training you do. One of the things I'm really proud of is I'm really good at balancing different skill levels inside the same class. I'm really, really proud of that. And the other thing that I see is that people think they can outsmart the mental game. I see a lot of that. Everybody thinks they're different, gifted, and special. And I suppose the most common thing is people not knowing what they're doing when they're getting it right. That's probably the biggest thing I see. They can tell you every way they've screwed up a match. They can tell you every way they're going to screw up the next match. They can tell you why they tank at classifiers. They can tell you why they suck at steel. But they don't know what is happening for those 20 magical seconds, typically one stage per match, when they're getting it right. And if they chalk it up to not thinking and not caring, that's cool and that's not wrong, but that's not duplicable. Right? Go to nationals, stage one. Don't think, don't care. Right? Got it. It's just not possible to do. So what I really like to do is show people a path forward for improving technical skill, making it become subconscious, and then show them how to get access to that subconscious skill under pressure, on demand, the vast majority of the time. But going back to your question, it really hasn't changed that much. It's just I can tell what other instructors are doing by what people are attempting to do when they're shooting for score.
Now, back when you first started, there was a lot less of instruction up on YouTube. Now, pretty much everything is up on YouTube or Instagram. I mean, people can see things and reach out, and there's probably a small amount of instructors that I can count on my fingertips that have no social media presence simply because they're just very old school. But the majority of people, the hotness, they're all over social media and they're all over YouTube posting their videos. So people have a good sense of, like you said, occluding dots or shooting a certain way. But I don't think many people are doing like when I first started, taking the book and just doing from the book. Everybody's taking stuff from the videos now. They're basically learning from videos. Do you think that's beneficial, or do you think that it becomes a detriment and then you have to quote unquote like unfuck them when they get to your class?
Oh my goodness, are we doing F words? Oh my goodness.
YouTube, no, seriously, YouTube is within the first, I think it's like first 6 minutes or something like that. If you curse, it's frowned upon, and then your like video is pushed down. So you got to make it past for the first 6 to 8 minutes without using a curse word, and then you're okay. So we passed that. I think where we're at now, we're like at 19 minutes, so we can say fuck all we want.
Well, I am not going to, because I like to be a role model for parents and children in the firearms world. But it doesn't bother me one bit. There's a lot of them. Yeah, you stunned me into silence. Would you please repeat the actual question?
Sure. I mean, okay. So in the shorthand version of that, people watch videos.
Oh, yes, I remember now. Yes, of course.
Now they come to your class and they've picked up every single different technique from all these different instructors without actually learning from that instructor. They're just learning from the video. I mean, if you want to think back to the Karate Kid, where he said that Mr. Miyagi said you could not learn karate from a book. So they're learning gun jitsu from videos, and it's just not the same thing actually from learning an instructor who's watching you do the technique. So does that become a problem from you as an instructor that they come to your class and you have to unfuck them?
So I am not real big on specific techniques. Everybody's body is a little bit different. Everybody's goals are different. Everybody's potential is a little bit different. But your question specifically, people don't understand what they need to do. And that is figure out the right way to meet the requirements of the sport, best, right, correct, whatever you want to call it, and then have those things become subconscious. And what I see a lot of is people will learn to do a certain thing with their body or with their grip or whatever. And it's probably a great idea. It's probably a great technique. But what they're doing instead of shooting is they're displaying technique and they're doing it very consciously. And I think that what some people may not know is when I was on the quest to GM, literally the only information I had was a timer and a sight picture. I didn't have hit factor calculations. I didn't know. The only reason I knew that a 4-second L pres was good was because I saw a video of Eric Gaffel doing a 4-second L pres, and I thought, well, that must be good. That's the only piece of information that I had. And for me, it was all about taking the most simple gun handling technique and performing it at the limit of human function. And I didn't even know back then I was building subconscious skill. I guess if I'd sat and thought about it, I would have come to that conclusion. But all I knew was when I got an open gun, I was having so much fun that I didn't want to put it down. You know, people talk about dry fire being boring. It was my favorite thing in the world to do. I would go dry fire for 2 to 4 hours, you know, and I don't think people are willing to do that. Joey Sauerland is, Jay Beal is, those guys are. They love it. Jay Beal likes to dry fire more than he likes to go to matches. Joey Sauerland goes to the range and fires maybe 30 rounds over the course of 2 hours, you know. So what people need to understand what they're actually learning from these videos. And the cool thing about a class is so maybe this is the difference. If you get a book or watch a video and you don't get immediate gratification from that technique, you're going to quit doing it. You're going to get bored. You're going to go do something else. If with the benefit of an instructor is I can say, yes, that's excellent. Now do that for another 10 minutes. But I don't know that there's anything good or bad. Now, there is one thing that's different is there's so much information out there and a lot of it kind of conflicts with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying one's right or one's wrong, but if I'm watching a video from this guy, he's telling me to do this, and I'm watching a video from the other guy telling me to do that, how am I going to know?
Right.
We are in an unprecedented hysteria about how to grip a handgun, right? And I'm not saying that's not an important conversation, but I'm saying nobody ever says, "Oh, I really tanked last month's match because I only had 17% pinky tension instead of 18%. Now I know what to do." You're never going to hear that. Just like you're never going to hear somebody say, "Oh, I cannot believe I lost that match because I had a 22 split instead of an 18. I can't believe it." You're not going to hear things like that. The failure is always mental, and it's always caused by too much conscious thought and negative imprints to the self-image, primarily during training.
Okay. So I want to ask you this, since we brought this up. I think that one of the struggles that I've had is I dry fire a lot, but I'm not gripping the gun. Like my first shots are always perfect. My second shots are always off when I'm not thinking about it.
Are we talking about live fire or dry fire?
Live fire.
Okay.
And
So
someone mentioned to me, before you get there, someone mentioned to me
go ahead.
that you're not gripping the gun after your first shot. You're gripping, you're getting the gun out of the holster. You know, you've got that grip that you have your presentation and you're breaking the shot and it's a perfect shot. And then the second shot it's not where I'm wanting to go, where it's supposed to go.
But your grip didn't cause that.
Interesting.
Your grip contributed to it, but it didn't cause it. The second shot is wild because you fired the gun without an acceptable sight picture. Boy, you're going to get me fired up now. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about, right? I don't think anybody is saying this, but what people are hearing is if you grip the gun correctly, you can rip splits on demand on less than 2 sight pictures, right? So let's look at things that don't cause bad shots. Grip does not cause bad shots. Moving does not cause bad shots. Leaning does not cause bad shots. Those things cause the poor sight pictures that
Visual
cause the bad
patience.
shots. Right.
Visual patience. Yes.
Right.
Because internally you're like, I have to be shooting it faster in order to get those shots off. And if I'm not doing that at that particular time, that means that I'm gripping the gun wrong, as opposed to I could probably do it if I just took whatever tenths of a second to confirm, get the good trigger pull and all that. But yes, it's very, very hard
So
to have that visual patience.
anybody who is focused solely on splits is only one of two good reasons for that. They're stupid and they don't own a calculator. They don't know how head factor works. Or they have whittled every single piece of non-shooting time out of their game, and they need to win a world championship with faster splits. Everybody else, I mean, geez, you're a law enforcement trainer, okay? Would you rather hit something twice with a 30 split or have the second shot go wild at 18?
Right.
You don't even have the option. And when tactical people are obsessed with splits, I get even crankier. You know, these are the guys that are talking about things that'll get you killed on the streets. Well, what'll get you killed on the streets is a wild second shot. And that'll be worse than you getting killed. That'll get an innocent bystander killed. That'll get 2 people killed in the streets.
And that is very common. They just had a shooting, I believe, in New York City, where the guy ripped off a couple shots and they're shooting as fast as they can. And they barely hit the bad guy and hit a bystander or 2. So, yeah.
I mean, what are we doing? Literally, what are we doing? You know, the piece of information, I'm a little embarrassed that I didn't know this until so late in my career. But when you take the number of points down caused by a poor shot and divide it by the hit factor, it tells you how much time you had to shoot a better shot. And the numbers are shocking. Okay? In a 5 hit factor, how much time do you have to prevent or correct a miss?
Do you want my wild ass guess on that?
Yeah, I do.
I would say 0.3 seconds.
You've got 3 entire seconds.
3 entire seconds.
3 entire seconds. A miss is a 15-point penalty, and a 5 hit factor, 15 divided by 5 is 3. Well, okay, you've got 2.99 seconds to shoot an alpha and improve your hit factor. So the first thing we have got to do is we have got to get rid of mystery mics, mystery deltas, and penalty shots. We've got to do that because there's nothing we can do. I mean, so this gets into another problem. I suppose part of this problem is most clubs have a shooter who is so fast that he can take a mic on every stage and still win the match. And your average C-class shooter who's shooting a lot of alphas, they look at that and they go, that's the model. I need to run faster and shoot faster. And that works really well locally. But that quits working very abruptly when you go out of town. Right? What we've got to do instead, so splits is the greatest risk for the least reward. Okay? The non-shooting time is the greatest reward for the least risk. And on the one hand, I hate it because it's hurting people's shooting careers. But on the other hand, I love it because it's keeping me in business. You know, and the other thing we've got to do is we've got to get rid of this idea that slow shooting is accurate shooting and fast shooting is sloppy shooting. We've got to get rid of that idea, right? I had an IDPA shooter in Washington State. I cut his stage time in half with the exact same number of points down. Cut it in half. Because his entire career, he believes that shooting zeros is slow. So if he wants zeros, he has to slow down. In a sport where the average target distance is probably 7 yards, come on. Now, it does require a second sight picture, and it is going to slow you down from hair on fire, crazy, rabid raccoon speed. But consciously slowing down is one of the two biggest problems in sport.
Yep, the conscious control of speed. And I said visual patience. I was thinking about this the other day. So someone like Eric Raffel, and I've talked to him before, and you watch him, he looks like a robot. He looks like he has zero emotion going on. And, he might be a robot. He might be working for Elon Musk. He might be a prototype. I don't know. But when he shoots without any emotion. And when you're shooting a stage, even though you try not to have emotion, there's like a welling up of, especially like you're running into position. It's hard. And I think you've said this before, or Lanny has said this before about you're running around and then you got to like take a calm shot without moving the trigger. And to separate that emotion from what's going on is very hard to do. And that's where you get that problem with visual patience. And that's where you get the problem with the estimation. We're very bad at figuring out time. We're very, very poor at time. So how, someone like Eric is an outlier, but how do you get to that point?
Well, so you called him a robot. What does a robot do?
In what sense?
An actual robot. What does an actual robot do?
It's programmed to do something.
Right. Or an actual robot does whatever it was designed and programmed to do.
Correct.
Eric Raffel has been designed and programmed to have the high hit. Well, he doesn't win as many stages as people might think, but he's probably the smartest mathematician shooter on the planet. So emotions and thoughts are related, but they're not the same thing. Okay. And I would suggest that if an athlete can control their thoughts for 20 seconds, emotion will not be relevant. Now, if they lose control of their thoughts, emotion is going to come up. Okay. The primary reason Eric, well, I don't know the guy. I can only sort of diagnose it from the outside looking in. I do know he expects to win the match. So if that's an emotion, that's his emotion. Right? The only time I've ever seen any emotion out of him is when he was shooting against Bob Vogel in some shoot off. Now that was emotion.
That was Steel Challenge. That was not Steel Challenge. That was
I believe it was Pro-Am.
The Pro-Am. Yeah. I was actually in the Bay when that happened with Bob Vogel. It was amazing.
Well, so Bob Vogel had nothing to lose, just going out there and executing what he sees. Eric Raffel doesn't want to lose to some hillbilly cop from Ohio, right? So he's probably feeling a little bit of pressure, maybe more than normal. And we could talk about pressure literally all you want to, but he was yelling your favorite word going back to that last position, right? And then please don't quote me on this. If memory serves, the next segment was Eric Raffel having trouble on a plate rack. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's because the negative imprint from the previous mistake has caused him to lose access to his ability to shoot a plate rack. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. But typically, he's programmed his stage plan, so it's 100% subconscious. Eric Raffel appears to me to be probably the best predictive shooter on the planet. And that's probably because of his incredibly high round count. That guy shoots more rounds a month than Joey Salatin just shot in his entire life. And if predictive shooting is something that you want to be able to do, live fire is the only way to get there. Like high volumes of live fire. And if there's a benefit to high volumes of live fire, predictive shooting, as I understand it, would be the biggest benefit. For example, you mentioned having your second shot go wild. Okay. If you learned what it looks like and feels like to have that happen correctly at every distance you're likely to encounter, and then
Hmm.
you go out and you train that for 2,000 rounds a day for 10 years, how good are you going to be at that?
Of course.
You're going to be great at it. The problem is if we try to skip the high amount of live fire that's necessary for that skill to be a thing. And that's, and by the way, I don't believe that's two shots on one sight picture. I don't believe that's a double tap. I believe that is predicting where your sight is going to be so you don't have to confirm it. I mean, confirm is the wrong word. So you have to wait for it. Okay. Now going back to your grip comment, if I have a poor grip and I don't shoot a lot of live fire, my gun's going to go up, down, shimmy, shimmy, so. I don't want to wait for all that. Okay. With a better grip, I can catch the down and I can eliminate the up, down, shimmy, shimmy, settle. Right. And yes, grip is required to shoot accurately faster, but grip is not required to shoot accurately.
Correct.
And just to put that one to bed, a human being, I don't know if it's different from women because I don't know if I've ever heard a woman complain about shooter's elbow, but that's also very interesting. I just thought about that. If you're an adult male over 35 and you try to grip a handgun 100% for a long dry fire session, you are going to get shooter's elbow. That's just all there is to it.
I have it.
That's going to happen. So my solution was always, I never did most of my dry fire with 100% grip, but I would finish up my dry fire session with 100% grip. That's really important. But set all that aside, that is the last thing you should be thinking about when that timer goes off at a match.
Of course.
But that's not what people do.
Well, so I don't want to go too far into this. You always had, I call it like your mantra, like, center the dot, call the shot. I forgot the terminology you used to use for that.
That's a point of focus.
Okay, point of focus. But couldn't your point of focus being like, get a grip, let it rip or something like that?
It could, but here's what you have to understand about a point of focus, okay? If you say get a grip, let it rip, do you really know what that means?
If I grip the gun properly, I'll be able to shoot faster.
Okay. Is your sight picture or your visual patience, is that 100% subconsciously reliable?
Well, I guess that would be the point.
In your example, with all due respect, it would not.
No, I know, but that would be the point. If it was at that and you needed to focus on grip, maybe that would be the thing to say.
All right, so let's go back. How likely is Eric Grauffel to fire a shot without an acceptable sight picture?
I would say probably maybe 0.5% ever.
I would put it way lower than that. Okay. That gun is not going to go off without an acceptable sight picture. So he can think about whatever he wants. He can think about the price of champagne in the summer. It doesn't matter what he thinks about. If the stage plan is subconscious and visual patience is 100%, he could think about grip. And we're using him as an example, right? These are not specific Eric Grauffel thoughts. Christian Seiler, that gun is not going to go off without the dot where he wants that bullet to go. So he can think about the angle of his left foot if he thinks that important. He can think about a specific technique. But the average USPSA shooter is highly likely to fire the gun without an acceptable sight picture, usually on the second shot on one target. And until we rein that in and get rid of the mics and deltas and penalties, none of the rest of it matters. And what the point of focus is designed to do is create a circuit between your eyes and your trigger finger that either bypasses the brain or goes through it undisturbed, whichever analogy you like. And I just did a class in Florida. I did a joint class with Keita Bussey, and she handled movement and I handled match mode. And it was amazing. These guys were literally walking around the range in Florida chanting, "Put the dot in the middle of the effing target." They were chanting it as a group, right? Because we've just solved the biggest problem. I mean, most people's regrets when they get off of a stage is some sort of temporary lapse of visual patience, right? I had a delta, I had a mic, I had a no shoot. And what they're saying is, I fired the gun without an acceptable sight picture. That's what they're really saying. And if they go back to training and focus on grip, they haven't solved that problem. But until you decide that the gun is not going to go off without an acceptable sight picture, that's your biggest opportunity.
Where do you get that discipline from? I'm not just in this, but just like I'm just thinking this applies to a lot of different sports and whatever, but where does that discipline comes from? You have to make that conscious decision early on that this is the most important thing that I need to be working on, and I'm not gonna variant from it, and that way it's gonna be there, or is this something that just never happens?
When you drive your car, do you drive on the right side or the left side?
I'm driving on the right side
Where does that discipline come from?
because I had to,
You
because I've
know
always
that
done it.
well, you know you're going to die if you don't,
Okay.
right? Or kill somebody else. So the discipline comes from, you know, this is the way, this is what I've got to do to be successful driving this car. Driving the car on the left side of the road for an extended period of time is not an option. Okay. So you know from success and potentially fear of failure, what takes people so long is if they don't get a big win pretty quick, they go back to something else. And going back to your comment about videos versus instructors, I'm going to make them do it, and then I'm going to prove to them it's vastly better than the dumb stuff they were doing before. Oh, and by the way, I will curse a little bit because one of my biggest fans said, I need to say this over and over again. Hit Factor doesn't give a shit about your splits. And now that we're into the cursing zone, I can say that emphatically like I wanted to. Okay? But it really doesn't. You know, so the first thing we have to do, we have to understand that what I really want is a subconscious performance. Okay, I'm the only person that, well, there's a couple of other people, but I'm the guy that's out there saying we need a subconscious performance, and the only way to get a subconscious performance is to give the conscious mind something to do to keep it busy. Okay, so the point of focus we're discussing, the reason it works so well is it is a job for my conscious mind to do that keeps it busy, that gives me my best chance of acceptable accuracy.
See, I think that visual patience, now that we're talking about it, and I know we're talking heavy, but I think visual patience is something that should be taught early on. I
It
think,
is.
well, I think people are taught how to make an accurate shot, and right, you put the sight, the iron sight, the dot in the place you want to pull the trigger, and then the gun goes off. It's hard to hold that for a long time, right? Because you know, and I know that you can aim all you want, but until you pull the trigger, you're not going to know what's going to happen. So people learn that. They learn about the trigger. They learn, bad, good things about trigger. They learn bad, good things about grip, all this other stuff. But visual patience, I know you say it's taught early on. You go to matches, why are people failing? Because they don't have visual patience, right? If they,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. And visual patience is tough. And it's tough not just for shooting sports, which is great. That's why I love shooting sports. But it's in a lot of aspects of our life, having that kind of patience is tough to come by.
Well, so you called it discipline. I call it a choice that the athlete makes. And when the shooter comes to the conclusion that, hey, so you should hear so sometimes when we do mental management online, I've been working a lot in PRS with mental management. And the PRS shooters, when I ask them, I say, hey, what do you think the pistol shooters or the practical shooters' biggest problem is? And they're like, we don't know. And I say they fire the gun without an acceptable sight picture. And you should see the look on the PRS guys when they find out that the pistol guys or the practical shooters are firing the gun without an acceptable sight picture. Now, you can get lucky for a little while, right? Everybody has, if you remember back in our Iron Sight days, everybody has shot a stage without really seeing their sights. And sometimes you get lucky, but that luck is not sustainable, duplicable, or repeatable. The other thing is, they're afraid it's going to slow them down. That's what they're afraid of. They're afraid that if they see their second shot, it's going to slow them down. But when I asked you how much time a mic was working in a 5-hit factory, you said 3 tenths a second, and you looked pretty surprised to hear it was 3.
I was. Can you
Now,
still hear me?
here's the other problem. Yeah, you're fine.
Okay,
You're
because
fine.
you're a little
I'm
you're a
getting
little
fired up now,
pixelated.
so
Okay, but you're getting a little pixelated. So I don't know if your roommate just logged on to Netflix or something, but you're a little Max Headroomy.
everything is good on my end. What
Okay.
you could be seeing is I could be turning into Matrix right now, so you might be seeing the Matrix flicker in and out as I get passionate.
Okay. Well, we're gonna go a little bit longer, hopefully, and we might just have to reconnect. I can stay on for those of you who are tuning in right now, and I thank you for it. But I know Steve has a lot of important stuff to say. So if this doesn't fix itself, maybe him recycling might help it. But Steve, try and continue.
Okay. So you called it discipline. I call it a choice for the conscious mind. The foundation of everything we do in mental management is this crazy idea that we can control what we're thinking about. And so if I control what I'm thinking about, I do, that does the discipline to go out there and put the dot in the middle of the target. And haven't you noticed when you're really interested in seeing what you need to see, you are no longer thinking about anything else?
All right, so Steve, I'm getting
Yeah.
some people in the chat saying that the audio is bad. You are pixelated. I'm hearing that too. So I will stay on, and hopefully
Okay.
everyone else will stay on. Just
Okay.
try. We'll
I'll be
try
up.
just logging off and coming back on, and I'll keep the stream going. Go ahead. All right. So while Steve is waiting, I'll just remind you guys you are listening, watching to the Firearms Nation podcast. This is our pre-Turkey Day show, and thank you for coming back. Thank you for staying with me for all these years. It goes up and it goes down, and there's Steve again. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed on this. It doesn't look good right away. Can you hear me, Steve?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, you're still kind of pixelated, and I don't know if you're on Wi-Fi, correct?
Sure.
Well, we'll try.
I
Keep
tell you
going.
what, I will try to reconnect you. There's one thing I can do, so I'll go try something. I'll be right back.
Okay, and you make sure no one else is on the Wi-Fi. We're not going to go that much longer. We've already been going for almost 50 minutes. So I just want to talk a little bit more with you on this so we can finish this topic and then just talk a little bit about the stuff that you've been doing recently, especially in South Africa. But go ahead, do what you need to do,
Okay,
and
so
I will try and entertain people here.
perfect. Your job is to compliment me profusely until I return.
And this is the beauty of a live show. If this is recorded, when the podcast comes out, obviously this will all be edited out. But those of you that I'll start looking here, those of you that have come onto the show, yes, I've learned a lot from Steve. Just like you, Joe, as in law enforcement. He probably was the second. Oh, he was the first person that I ever connected with. He watched match videos of me and then came up with a program. And then, I went from there, and I've taken so many classes, but it's funny. I'm having this conversation with him right now, and we're at a really good point, the apex of this conversation. And of course, Murphy's Law hits that it's, he gets pixelated. I don't know what's going on, but, He's absolutely right. And that's the frustrating part about it. It's that visual patience that it's elusive. And I think the people who can figure it out earlier on are the ones that uh, get up there faster. I know a lot of people have inherent skills that they're really good at. I know size matters. Yeah, I'm sure. But I'm just, like the big truck driver guys, and not all truck drivers are big, but you know what I'm talking about. Big, huge guys with nice, big, meaty hands. The gun's not moving around in their hands. They get away with a lot more than someone who's smaller or thinner. It's tougher for, like I'm not a big dude. And, um, I've always struggled with the handgun and stuff like that because the guns do hit me. All right. But again, thanks for sticking around. Let's see. I'm keeping my fingers crossed on this. We'll bring Steve back onto the show. Hey, how you doing, Steve?
Great. Any better?
Yeah, it still kind of sucks. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Um,
So we'll probably have to wrap it up, sounds like. I just want to I want to thank everybody for their support and let them know you can always go to upcoming classes at andersonshooting.com to see where we're going to be, what we're going to be doing. And if you want a free class in your area, just send me an email, steve@andersonshooting.com. We can do a class on your range and you can get it for free.
okay, now that you said that, and we'll keep that plug in. You're good right now. So
Great.
finish your thought before it goes bad again.
Well, okay. So I need people to become experts in their best shooting instead of their worst shooting. That's what I need people to do. And the conclusion they're going to come to is I shoot my best when I'm not thinking and I don't care. So how do we duplicate that? Well, we duplicate that environment with mental management. And then now that we've gotten access to that, you're going to use training to reduce the amount of time spent not shooting. Quit worrying about your splits and use your training to reduce the amount of time spent not shooting. I would love to show you how to do all of that.
So you've been mentioning several names here. You've got your own little shooting. You sponsor shooters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gaz and some of the and JBL, they're all sponsored. They're wearing the Van Halen stuff. So tell me about these shooters.
So Jay Beal was
Who's been on the
second.
show, by the way. But actually, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but a lot of these guys go in the back catalog. I've interviewed them because they're all just super nice guys and great shooters. But go ahead.
So Jay Beal, he is one of my favorite human beings on the planet. We have probably spent less than 12 hours together in the same place over the course of the years. And we've talked on the phone, obviously on podcast numerous times, but he's like my little mini me of shooting. And he had the benefit of listening to the podcast for years before he ever shot his first match. So he was able to bypass a lot of this stuff. And my favorite Jay Beal quote of all time, I have never had a dumpster fire match and I never will. Okay. Gaz Evans in South Africa is the other shooter that I sponsor. And by the way, I don't sponsor them. Well, obviously, their shooting is one of the reasons, but their personalities and their drip or their riz is why I sponsor them. Right? Because I trust Jay Beal and Gaz Evans to be me when I am not there. And I don't trust very many people to be me because that's what a sponsor's doing, right? Walther is sponsoring me to be Walther when Walther is not there. Right. So I take that very, very seriously. But yeah, fantastic shooters, fantastic human beings. Jay Beal had a stratospheric rise. Joey Sauerland is not on our team, but I've been working with Joey very closely ever since he was not at the very beginning of his career, but pretty early on. In fact, I believe I'm trying to think but when he won his first area championship, the vast majority of the live rounds he had ever fired were on my range. If that puts that into perspective, right?
Oh yeah.
And so one of the great things about Joey is he never tried to outsmart mental management like people do. Um, and he is in such great physical condition that he can do 1,000 reps of something that most people can't do 50 reps of. And I believe that's the biggest benefit to athleticism and physical fitness is the ability to do more reps without injury or fatigue. Because that's what it comes down to. You know, once you've got a solid match mode, we just need to figure out the best way for a human body to do something on a course of fire and make that subconscious. Fantastic.
Couple other questions. You've been doing a lot of stuff in South Africa. You're going to continue to do that.
Yeah, I'm going again. I think I'm going twice in 2025. I believe it's around May. I'm going to be there again. Yeah, I love going there. It's it's like it's like my home away from home. I have so many dear friends in South Africa, and I can't wait to see them again. I love it there.
That's very cool. Uh, you've written 3 books. You've always talked about your 4th book. Are you actually going to write a 4th book?
Um, Maybe. So writing a book is a huge pain in the ass, and writing the book is so much fun. Editing, proofreading, formatting. In fact, I may hire you to be the editor of this book so that I can just write it and then you can do everything else. I don't know. But lately, I have been kicking the idea around about writing another book. Technically, I have written a 4th book. It's available on my insider program. It's called How To Now. That book is not available anywhere but the insider program. And that particular book is 20 or maybe 30 one-day solutions. So like take 30 things, you know, how to do a sub-second draw. Well, there's a chapter on that. How to get closer to a sub-second reload. There's a chapter on that. And that's what that book's about. But lately, I have kind of been kicking around the idea of another book. It's just a lot of non-creative work, which is, like I said, it's a pain in the ass.
You're associated with mental management systems, right? You can fly that banner. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm one of roughly 12, maybe 13 certified coaches. There was another shooter that got in a little bit of trouble for selling a mental management class where you can teach a mental game class, you can do whatever you want. You just can't call it mental management unless you're certified by Lanny.
And I mean, that's from what I know, you're the only person in the shooting community, the practical shooting community, that's doing mental management. I know they do it for other types of shooting, but not practical shooting. Is that correct?
So somebody that can teach mental management can teach it to any athlete in any sport, as you learned a couple days ago. I am the most active in what we call practical shooting, and other people who, so let's say Lanny even, right? Lanny, as brilliant as he is, he doesn't understand the sport well enough to coach it as well as I do, right? Think of practical shooting like timed miniature golf. That's what we're really doing here. Lanny's great with golfers, but if golf was timed, that would change the whole sport. And we're playing timed golf, and getting people to avoid choosing speed or accuracy and then losing the other one is something I'm extremely good at. And it all goes back to getting an acceptable sight picture with subconscious skill. I got into a debate with somebody online, a very friendly debate because I try to avoid those in general. It's kind of like teaching a pig to sing. It wastes your time and annoys the pig, right? So I just leave that alone. But I was railing against the conscious control of speed. And the person I was debating with thought I was saying don't go fast. Well, going slow is just as dumb as going fast, right? Number one, going slow is dumb intentionally. And the other thing is, anytime we're consciously controlling our speed in competition, we are by definition not getting subconscious skill. And we're always going to choose the wrong speed anyway. So here's a crazy idea. Train your butt off in dry fire, get stupid fast, get JBO fast, and then put you out in the middle of the target with a subconscious stage plan. It works great.
Well, I think you're writing your book as we talk because you've got what you're talking about, all these little things. You've got the 20 plus years of teaching people to fall back on. You've got guest people who can write stuff or talk to you about, including Jay Bill and Gaz. I think there's something here. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, it's just 6
If you
months
guys
of
out there who are watching this or who are listening to this want a book, please contact Steve and say, I want a book. And I think
now.
we'll
So
address the issue.
that would be interesting. If somebody wants to give me an idea for the book they want me to write, that I would do.
Well, there you
For
go,
sure.
folks. Get it out there. Because that's why one of the things I love is doing this is because we're memorializing this conversation for as long as it'll be up there in the ether world. Your speech of what you're talking about, this discussion will be out there, and plenty of people can listen to it or watch it, and that's great. Take these concepts. So yeah, I think there's, and that's the same thing with writing a book. Look, I love books. I don't think people read enough anymore, but I think there's a lot of value to books. I think too much is placed on videos, although I love videos. One of the things I always want to do, and I don't want to divert too much, but I've always wanted to write a book. I just haven't found the right, like you said, I haven't found the right topic. I've played around with it, but and then there's a time commitment. And in a previous life, I actually was a writer, but we're not going to get into that.
You said
Okay.
so.
What?
I just said if you say I would be fascinated to hear about that, but we
Well, I was a
obviously don't have time.
screenwriter. I wrote screenplays. So I had
Oh, nice.
I had a whole other life in Hollywood, California. Previous
That's
life.
so cool. I have
Yes.
a brilliant idea for a fictional novel. Brilliant. Would you like to hear it?
Well, I think people want to hear it. Sure.
So, what if, okay, most of what we send is transmitted across the internet, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What if there was a clearinghouse for everything you send that edits it according to fate? For example, if you're applying for the wrong job, this clearinghouse that exists is going to turn your resume into crap so you don't get that job. If you're on a dating site and this is not your soulmate and you look at a picture of this person, this clearinghouse is going to screw it up so that you don't meet this person ever, right? So this idea that there's this clearinghouse for things that are transmitted that arrive at the recipient in a way that suits your fate. Now that's a book I'd write.
Okay, but so I used to sit in these meetings all the time with writers, and they'd come
Oh
in.
yeah.
So they'd come in and they'd pitch. So the first question is, what's the conflict here?
What do you mean what's the conflict?
So there's a clearinghouse, right?
Yeah.
But what's the conflict? What's the story?
The story is about a guy who is trying to do these things, right? And the clearinghouse is steering him towards his fate, and he's got to keep trying because he doesn't know this is happening. He thinks his resume is getting to Firearms Nation completely undisturbed. So it's this journey he's going to go on to better himself until the right thing gets to the right place.
Okay, we're going to work on this.
I've
gonna
already
work on
talked to
this.
Jim Carrey about it. Jim Carrey's on board. What's your problem?
Okay, we're gonna have to talk about this. There needs to be a little bit more, and I don't want to talk too much about it because some wise guy is going to take that story and then going to sell it to some book publisher, and then you'll never get to make this story.
And
So,
I do want to apologize to listeners of the Firearms Nation for going down that rabbit hole. I get excited sometimes.
No,
I get
that's
a little
good.
bereft. Yeah.
So okay, plans for the holiday? This is our pre-Thanksgiving show. You got anything going on?
Next question.
Okay. Um, next class that you're going to be teaching?
Florida with Joey Sauerland. That is at the beginning of January.
Where in Florida?
Ruskin, I believe it's called
Ruskin, Florida.
Guncraft.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. I've heard of the range. Okay.
So
Very interesting.
so Joey and I do a really cool class where they get the entire mental management program, and then 2 to 3 hours on the range with me, and then they spend a day with Joey going over. He has taken my ideas of dry fire and kind of taken them onto the shooting range, which is something I wasn't smart enough to do. I figured if I'm going to the range, I got to shoot. Well, Joey figured out that, hey, I'm at the range. If I'm working on something technical, I don't need to fire a bullet, right? If I'm teaching my body how to do something more efficiently, I don't need to fire a bullet while that's happening. And so, particularly if somebody is ammunition challenged or ammunition sensitive, it's a really cool class. He also does a physical fitness portion too, because everybody wants to know, how do I get a body like Joey Sauerland's?
That sounds like fun. Good for you. And yeah, I'm glad you're doing stuff in Florida. Florida's great. Okay, so we're gonna wrap it up here. I want to thank everybody who's tuned in. There's a bunch of people in the chat room. Thank you for. I don't know if you're traveling. I don't know if you're sitting at home or wherever, but you tuned into this show. Thank you very much, and I will do my best to produce this so it could be an audio podcast and play it for the people who are flying home on Sunday. But to everybody out there, have a happy and great Thanksgiving. Thanks to you, Steve. Thank you for everything that you're doing. And thanks for being a friend.
Okay. Can I do the catchy catchphrase?
You most certainly may.
Until we meet again, online, on the range, on the Zoom, on the phone, in your Subarus, in your bucket trucks, or anywhere else, be like me, do what I do, say it with me. 1, 2, 3, love you, bye, and get to work. Thank you so
Amen.
much.